hard and full of unintended consequences. I'm just taking the government on their own terms. In the government's short life, it has a long-running feud with X. It's portraying it as a cause of serious harm, going back to Southport and the call for Elon Musk's remark that civil war is inevitable, the Grok nude images and so forth. And what the government's doing, while complaining about it, while referring it to Ofcom, as Liz Kendall, the Technology Secretary, did earlier this week, it is posting through hundreds of accounts, and that's doing two things. One is, it's making money for X. That's the genius of the social media business model. Important institutions and people give them content for free, which they monetize, and it's entrenching the very dominance that X enjoys. Why are they doing that? On its own terms, that is an absurd position to have. It's completely contradictory, moaning and whinging about X, and feeding the beast every day.
Look, I moan about it every day, Kieran, but I still use it. Isn't this a collective action problem? There's no point in one government or one company coming off X in the heart and saying it's no good. Either everybody says, look, you're not meeting the standards we expect, and we all agree that we're not going to go there, we'll go somewhere else. Or you just take the British government off, and on their own, and nothing else happens, and all you have is a British government that's not communicating as effectively as it was.
It is a collective action problem, known in the jargon as the network effect, but no scale player, like the government of a P5 country, has ever actually bothered to try. And you could see what happens. I mean, one of the most fascinating things is that I know, and I'm sure you know plenty, you may even have one yourself, I know dozens of journalists, and presumably it's hundreds and thousands across the world, who have Truth Social accounts. Why? Because they need to follow President Trump. British journalists, if the British government takes its content somewhere else, British journalists will go there. British businesses and NGOs and interested political citizens, they will go there because it's the government. If a government, as a scale player, is not prepared to challenge the market dominance of X, who is?
Where would you suggest the British government goes? They're not going to go to Truth Social, let's be honest. There are a lot of more progressive-minded people who've gravitated over to Blue Sky.
Yeah.
But that's its own kind of special world, a ghetto world of progressive views and people shouting angry things against the right. I don't know if it really works any better than X, does it?
I would agree entirely with that, and to be honest, they can make an imperfect choice. They can do lots of factual stuff on LinkedIn, they already do, but they can make that the home for a lot of their statements. But also you have to wait and see how the market behaves. At the moment, you'd be insane to try and risk a lot of capital on a startup to challenge X, although there is an effort in the European Union to do that, because governments and large other scale players are too scared to leave X. If some of them leave X, you might have an imperfect world for a while where maybe you're not getting the reach that you think that you used to get on X, although most people on X hate the British government, so I don't quite know what benefit they're getting out of it. But you might, in time, change the market behaviour, and if you don't do anything, the market's not going to change.
Kieran, thanks for that. Kieran Martin there. You probably think of Damien Lewis primarily as an actor. Band of Brothers, Homeland, Wolf Hall, and 1,000 other things. You may also know him, though, as a musician, because he released his first album, Mission Creep, 3 years ago. It was well received, 4-star reviews. Certainly no one was saying it was some kind of celebrity indulgence and that he just simply fancied himself on the guitar. Now, Damien Lewis has just released his second album, Sweet Chaos it's called. Here's a taster of the song Traffic Jam. Well, Damien Lewis popped by the PM studio earlier, and I asked him when his aspiration to become a musician had first started.
I was always a musician. I always played the guitar, was in school bands, had very good music programs and theatre programs at my school. I was very lucky, passionate teachers. And I used to busk. I had a motorbike and a tent and a guitar. I used to go around Europe in the summers, and so I would play all across France and Spain. As long as I made enough money to pay for my packed campsite that night, then I could keep going. So I've always done it, always had a guitar, always played written songs. I'm much more publicly an actor. The opportunity to make some records and do it, I suppose, in a slightly more formalised, dare I say, a professional way, arose a few years back.
Did you make money out of the first album, or is this a way in which you are spending the money you have earned on.
The only, I think for legitimacy, so it feels authentic, it has to wash its own face. It has to pay for itself. So in that regard, and slightly unexpectedly, I've ended up running a business, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to just play music. So yes, it made enough money for me to be able to make a second record.
When I was looking into this, you're thinking, the second album, that is notoriously the hardest album. Because the first one did seem to go down quite well, and then you suddenly got this blank sheet in front of you, and it's like, I'm now going to make a second album.
Look, if you're one thing and you try something else out, people, sharpen their knives, get ready.
But they didn't on the first one. They didn't.
Well,
that's
the second one. Sort of, yes. Well, you realise that a 5-star review is got them amazed that wasn't terrible, and that's your 5-star review. So that's good. That's a good place to start from. Happily, they were kinder than that. But yeah, the second record, tricky second album. And in fact, it's reflected in the fact that I started out in one studio where I'd made the first record, because I made it all on tape. Old school, analog, beautiful vintage equipment. In fact, there was an 8-track Ampex in the corner of this particular studio where Benny King had recorded Stand By Me on it. And I started making this second record in the same studio before realising it wasn't quite the right sound. And I ended up actually recording this second record with Guy Chambers, who came and produced it with me, who your listeners will know.
Worked with so many artists.
Yeah, Robbie Williams, most famously,
and
produced with Robbie. So it has got a slightly different sound, but that's sort of what I wanted.
Yeah, there has been a review of this one. In fact,